in 1941, a psychological novel portraying the isolation and hardship of a prairie minister and his wife. Now, this phase helped establish a distinct Canadian voice in literature, moving away from colonial influences to focus on internal societal struggles. Then, 1960 onwards came the phase of recent Canadian novels, where it was mostly the post 1960s, talking about Canadian fiction flourished with increased international recognition. The themes became more diverse, including feminism, multiculturalism, and indigenous identity. There was experimental and postmodern techniques such as metafiction, unreliable narrators, and non-linear storytelling became very common. The emergence of indigenous and immigrant voices reshaped the literary landscape. Then we had playfulness with narrative structure and blending of genres in the postmodernist tendencies, self referential writing and breaking the fourth wall, exploration of fragmented identities and unstable realities were some of the key features in postmodernist tendencies. Native fiction or indigenous literature also gained prominence, challenging colonial narratives and presenting authentic indigenous perspectives. The themes of this phase included cultural survival, spirituality, and land rights. Many worked blend oral storytelling traditions with contemporary literary forms. Important works and authors included Margaret Atwood, The Edible Woman in 1969, The Handmaid's Tale in 1985, which was a leading voice in feminist and dystopian fiction. We also had Alice Munro, Lives for Girls and Women, written in 1971, which was a master of short fiction focusing on the intricacies of human relationships. We had Michael Ondaatje, who wrote The English Patient, which is again a poetic novel blending history and memory, winning the Booker Prize. We had Timothy Findlay, who wrote The Wars, which is again a postmodern war novel questioning memory and reality. And as in how we proceed, we also read the very recent one, David Sharianti, a novel exploring race, violence, and brotherhood in Toronto, named Brother. Now, the development of the Canadian novel reflects the country's shifting cultural and historical landscape from early colonial narratives to postmodern and indigenous voices. Canadian literature has absolutely carved out a distinct identity. The themes of survival, identity, multiculturalism, and reconciliation continue to shape its evolution, making it one of the most dynamic literary traditions in the world. Amazingly, from the 1960s onwards, Canadian literature underwent so much of transformation that the country's increasing multiculturalism, the rise of feminism, post colonial concerns, and indigenous resurgence deeply influenced the themes and styles of Canadian novels. This period included exploration of identity and nationalism in some of the writings. Canada has long struggled with its national identity, being influenced by both British and American cultures. Writers began to focus on what it meant to be Canadian, often questioning the country's colonial past and its multicultural future. Novels frequently dealt with the divide between English and French Canada. Two Solitudes, the book by Hugh MacLaren, had already set the stage in 1945 based on the same feature. Later works expanded this to include Indigenous identity, immigrant experiences, and the role of Canada on the global stage. Canada officially adopted multiculturalism as a policy in 1971, which was reflected in literature. Writers of diverse backgrounds brought in new perspectives, making Canadian fiction more inclusive. Themes of displacement, cultural assimilation, and hybrid identities became really very common. Some of the examples of this feature of multiculturalism and immigration can be found in Obasan in 1981 by Joy Kawaka, exploring the the internment of Japanese Canadians during World War II. The book Brother, written in 2017 by David Sharianti, examining the struggles of Afro Caribbean immigrants in Toronto. The rise of feminism in the 1960s and 70s influenced Canadian literature with more female protagonists and exploration of gender roles. Writers challenged patriarchal norms, focusing on women's struggle in domestic and public spheres. Margaret Atwood played a crucial role with works like The Edible Woman, written in 1969, which critiques consumerism and gender expectations. Then we had The Handmaid's Tale, 1985, which is again a dystopian novel about reproductive rights. Indigenous authors started gaining recognition gradually, telling stories from their own perspectives rather than being represented through colonial lenses. Storytelling traditions were woven in novels, creating unique narrative styles that blended oral tradition with written culture. Some of the key works, like Green Grass, Running Water by Thomas King, blends indigenous myths with contemporary issues. Monkey Beach, written in 2000 by Eden Robinson, a coming of age story incorporating Haisla traditions. Three Day Road, written in 2005 by Joseph Boyden, and indigenous perspective on World War One. Canadian novels often explore internal conflicts, alienation, and the search for meaning. This is again, we are focusing on the psychological and existential themes. Many works have a meditative tone, delving into character psychological struggles. Alice Munro's short stories often explore everyday human emotions in a deeply introspective way. Environmental consciousness and nature writing again be a part of this great transformation. Given Canada's vast landscape, nature has always played a role in its literature. Post 1960 novels often explore environmental concerns, climate change, and humanity's relationships with nature. For example, Surfacing, 1972, by Margaret Atwood, which explores a woman's return to nature as a way of self discovery. There has been postmodernist tendencies, as we earlier talked about in Canadian novels. Postmodernism emerged in Canadian literature from 1960s onwards, characterized by a break from traditional storytelling methods. This movement embraced experimental structures, self awareness, and playfulness. Metafiction being the self referential writing, postmodern novels often draw attention to the act of storytelling itself, making the reader aware that they are reading fiction. Characters sometimes acknowledge their fictional existence or interact with the author. Example, The English Patient, written in 1992 by Michael Ondaatje, a fragmented narrative that questions the reliability of memory and history. We have non-linear and fragmented narratives. Traditional chronological storytelling is often abandoned in favor of disjointed and circular structures. Multiple perspectives and shifting timelines add complexity. For example, in the book Coming Through Slaughter, written in 1976 by Michael Ondaatje, a fragmented poetic biography of jazz musician Buddy Bolden. There had been some unreliable narrators and multiple perspectives. For example, postmodern novels frequently use unreliable narrators, forcing readers to question the truth of the story. Some stories include multiple narrators presenting contrasting versions of reality. For example, The Wars, written in 1977 by Timothy Finley, a war novel that challenges the reliability of historical accounts. There are found playfulness and satire, for example, in humor, irony, and satire, which become common in postmodern works. Many novels blend serious themes with absurdity or dark comedy. For example, Green Grass Running Water, 1993, by Thomas King, a humorous yet powerful critic of colonialism, blending indigenous mythology with pop culture references. Intertextuality, referencing over other texts. Postmodern authors often reference other literary works, historical events, and popular culture within their narratives. Some books even rewrite classic stories from new perspective. Such one example can be Alias Grace in 1996 by Margaret Atwood, a historical novel based on the real 19th century murder case blending fiction with documentary history. Many Canadian postmodern novels mix historical facts with fictional elements, making it difficult to distinguish between the two. This technique questions the nature of truth and storytelling. Stone Angel, written in 1964 by Margaret Lawrence, though not purely postmodern, it blends memory with reality as the protagonist recalls her past. There is magical realism and mythical elements found in the Canadian works. Some Canadian postmodern works incorporate indigenous mythology, supernatural elements, or surrealism. For example, in the book Monkey Beach 2000 by Eden Robinson, a novel that blends indigenous beliefs with contemporary reality. Now, if you see the development of the Canadian novel post 1960 reflects a move towards diversity, experimentation, and self awareness. While general tendencies focus on identity, multiculturalism, feminism, and indigenous storytelling, postmodernist tendencies break traditional storytelling conventions using metafiction, nonlinear narratives, and intertextuality. Together, these elements make Canadian literature one of the most dynamic and innovative literary traditions in the world. Now, based on this unit, you can get certain important questions. For example, let me read the questions for you. For example, what concerns dominate Canadian fiction in the period up to 1900? Discuss the main contribution of Margaret Lawrence and Margaret Atwood to Canadian fiction. Now, before 1900, Canadian fiction was shaped by colonial history, geographical vastness, struggles for national identity, and survival against nature. The literature of this period was largely realistic and historical, focusing on themes such as pioneer life, indigenous encounters, and moral struggles. Some of the key concerns that dominated Canadian fiction up to 1900 are the colonial experience and national identity, where early Canadian fiction reflected both British and French colonial influences, often glorifying European settlers. Canada's relationship with Britain was a dominant theme as the country struggled to define itself as distinct from British Empire while still being a part of it. Writers sought to establish a Canadian national identity in contrast to British and American literary traditions. Survival and struggle against nature. Harsh winters, remote landscapes, and wilderness survival were central concerns in Canadian fiction. Susanna Moody's Roughing It in the Bush, 1852, and Catherine Parr's Trails, The Backwoods of Canada, depicted the challenges of pioneer life, offering first-hand account of settlers struggling against the unforgiving Canadian landscape. Nature was often depicted as both a source of beauty and a formidable adversary, shaping Canadian resilience. The role of Indigenous people and the frontier myth, where early fiction frequently portrayed Indigenous characters through the colonial gaze, often reducing them to noble savages or obstacles to settlement. Later, some writers began to depict more nuanced portrayals of indigenous cultures and their conflicts with European settlers. George Richardson's Wacosta, 1832, is an early example of a Canadian novel dealing with Indigenous resistance and British Canadian conflicts. Many early Canadian novels, followed by the historical romance tradition inspired by Sir Walter Scott's Scottish historical novels, were loyalist literature written by English speaking settlers who remained loyal to Britain after the American Revolution, celebrated British values and colonial stability. William Kirby's The Golden Dog in 1877 is a significant example, blending history with romance in 18th century Quebec. Canadian fiction before 1900 often contained strong Christian moral lessons promoting piety, self discipline, and the virtues of hard work. Many novels focused on women domestic roles, reinforcing traditional general expectations. Ralph Connor was popular author whose books such as Black Rock, written in 1898, combined adventure with the Christian moralizing. Fiction from this period often highlighted the experiences of European immigrants, particularly the Scots, Irish, and French. While Canada's indigenous populations had long been part of the land, immigrant narratives explored themes of displacement, assimilation, and the challenges of starting anew. French Canadian literature, such as the works of Philippe Aubert de Gasp's Les Anciens Canadiens, written in 1863, reflected the cultural preservation efforts of Quebec's francophone population. Now, if we talk about Margaret Atwood, who belonged to postmodernist tendencies and native fiction, we come to know that Margaret Atwood effectively strides the international scene as a novelist, and her novels are appreciated for their psychological depths, women's experiences, and women's positioning in the male dominated patriarchal society. The question of Canadian identity and complexities of living in the fast changing modern world, which is marked by confusion and even to a certain extent loss of human values, which she thinks are essential for sustaining a dignified and meaningful existence. Though Atwood denies that she is a feminist novelist, she shows deep concern with the women's issues in her fiction. For example, her novel, The Edible Woman, depicts the difficulty of a woman experiences to find her identity in an artificial society in which the novel places her. Of course, the excellence of the novel lies in problematizing the question of identity for both men and women. However, the focus largely remains on the heroine, Marian Alpine, her confusion, and her inability to commit to the various roles career woman, submissive fiancée, competent nurse. She tries. But at the same time, Marian is a rebel. In the later part of the novel, it is her rebellion that dominates the novel. She is in conflict with the social conventions and, as a thinking woman, attaches importance to her true self. Her successful flight from Peter's party, her refusal to eat first steaks and chops, and then a wide illogical varieties of food are testimony to her being a rebel and a search for authenticity of being. The second celebrated novel of Atwood is Surfacing, which became a classic in the field of feminist studies. Highly symbolic, with extensive use of imagery from different areas of existence and dealing with contemporaneously relevant issues, more prominently with the women questions. The novel attracted worldwide attention and praise from the critics and lay reading public. Beginning with the unnamed heroine, her betrayal by her lover, her decision to give birth to a child to atone for the earlier abortion at the behest of her love, and her eventual rebellion against the sham of society make this unnamed heroic and representative of all those women who are constantly inferiorized and are deprived of choices that can make them whole and authentic. The final break of the protagonist from society and her rejection of the oppressive patriarchal structures like love, marriage, and language make her truly heroic and a role model for other victimized women. Now, if you look for the question which talks about the contribution of Margaret Atwood to Canadian fiction, you would come to know that um, Margaret Atwood um, is one of the Canada's most celebrated writers, and she's also known for her contributions to fiction, poetry, and literary criticism. And her works explore themes of feminism, dystopia, environmental concerns, Canadian identity, and postmodern narrative techniques. And Atwood denies that she is a feminist novelist, but she shows deep concern with the women centric issues in her fiction. So that makes her quite different from the rest of the writers, and that is where she is an incredible uh, writer who has also written Surfacing that we are going to study in the next block. However, for this unit, we are done. Unit 9, we are done. We just could quickly conclude. We sum up that in the beginning, we talked about the location and the identity, and then there is a modernist phase that was followed by postmodernist writing, and then we also talked about a little about Margaret Atwood. Especially, we talked about the kind of writings and the postmodernist tendencies and native fiction that she has written for. So we take a break of just 1 minute, not more, exactly at 14:16. We start with the next unit, that is Unit 10, which talks about Margaret Atwood more in details. We will study about life and works, and we will focus on the special place of the blind assassin in Atwood's overall achievement. And we talk about her poetries and novels also. Just take a break of 1 minute, not more, please. Okay, let's start with Unit 10. Unit 10, it's Margaret Atwood Life and Works. And let's understand why we study this unit. The main objective of this studying this unit is to give our students a basic familiarity with the important aspects of Margaret Atwood's life, And here we will also discuss about the major works that will include novels and poetry. And there is a special place of the blind assassin in Atwood's overall achievement that we are going to discuss. And then there is survival, which is again a thematic guide to Canadian literature. So let's start with the early childhood and education first. So it's we are studying about Margaret Atwood, and she's one of the Canada's most celebrated writers, like earlier explained. She's known for her contributions to fiction, poetry, and literary criticism. Her works explore themes of feminism, dystopia, environmental concerns, Canadian identity, and postmodern narrative techniques. She was born in Canada. She was born in uh, uh, February 15, 1937, and she was the second child of three children who were born to Carl Edward Atwood, a professor of zoology, and Margaret Dorothy Killam, who was former dietitian and nutritionist. Harold Leslie, her elder brother, um, and Carl Atwood, her elder brother, was born in February 15, 1937, in Montreal. Carl Atwood was in the process of completing his PhD at McGill University's MacDonald College in Montreal, while Margaret was born in Ottawa on November 18th, 1939. She grew up in the wilderness of northern Quebec due to her father's work, and she gradually developed a deep love for storytelling and literature at an early age. She studied at Victoria's College, University of Toronto. She was a BA in English in 1961, followed by an MA from Harvard Radcliffe College in 1962. Atwood's early work reflects an interest in poetry and Canadian identity. Her first collection of poetry, that is Double Persephone, written in 1961, won the E.J. Pratt Medal, marking the start of her literary career. In the 1960s and 70s, she explored themes of gender, power, and survival in her poetry and fiction. Atwood has written numerous novels, each addressing complex social and political themes. Some of her major works included The Edible Women. In 1969, she wrote this novel. This was a debut novel as an early feminist work. She explored gender roles and consumer culture through a woman who begins to reject food after becoming engaged. She uses dark humor and satire to critique societal expectations of women. Then she wrote Surfacing, which was in 1972. It's a psychological novel about a woman returning to her hometown to find her missing father. Themes of Canadian identity, nature, and feminist self discovery are the central themes of this novel. And this is considered as a classic of Canadian literature and ecofeminism. Then she wrote Lady Oracle, that was in 1972. Sorry, 6. It's a postmodern novel blending gothic romance and satire. This follows a woman who fakes her death to escape societal pressures. And this novel explores themes of identity, deception, and literary creation. Then there was another novel, The Handmaid's Tale, written in 1985, which was Atwood's most famous novel, a dystopian work exploring totalitarian control over women's bodies. Set in the Republic of Gilead, a theocratic dictatorship where women are stripped of their rights. It's a powerful feminist critic, later adapted into a hit television series. Then it was Cat's Eye in 1988. It's a semi autobiographical novel about a woman artist reflecting on childhood bullying. Themes of memory, identity, and trauma were majorly seen in this novel. Then came The Robber's Bride, followed by Alias Grace, then the Mad Adam trilogy, which continued till 2013, and then finally The Testaments in 2019, which won the Booker Prize. Now, when we study Margaret Atwood, Uh, and when we talk about her beautiful work, we come to know that Margaret's memories of the cities, especially of Ottawa, are there being snow covered as she visits these places. And um, the intense desire to read comics motivated her to learn reading. Besides avidly reading comics, she also gets a chance to read fairy tales at a fairly young age of 5 when her parents ordered a collection of fairy tales. These fairy tales exercised an important influence on her in her later life, as these tales contained men and women who played a wide range of roles, from stupid to intelligent, virtuous to evil. These tales served as the springboard for Atwood's information. Atwood's interest in reading was fostered by her parents, who read to her a diverse range of books, including classics like Alice in Wonderland. In her later years, she read herself Edith Nesbit's The Phoenix works of Edgar Allan Poe. She also discovered Swift's Gulliver's Travel, Twain's Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn, and Charles G.D. Roberts' Wild Animals I Have Known, and other writings. Together with serious literature, Atwood also read and enjoyed a lot of mystery fiction, crime stories, and other popular stories. Additionally, she, together with her brother Harold, read a lot of comic books. These readings played an important role in her growth as a writer. Atwood did not attend school by this period of time, and until at least she was 11. She started writing quite early in life and scribbled, experimenting with words and her imagination. She began with wanting to be a writer, looking up for painting also for more some time. Then she wanted to become a dress designer, and becoming more practically wished to go into home economics. Now, Atwood spent a major of her life um, by skipping her classes. Like she skipped grade 7, and then gradually in grade 13 Margaret took a 10 examination and obtained high scores, and then gradually she's remembered for having been a very shy and serious girl in high school, but her paper suggests that she had another dimensions to her personality. She was witty, mischievous and playful, and she had been writing number of her works, which included novels. Like we discussed about a list of novels a little earlier, we come to know that that reflects a number of concerns which have remained central to her works written during the later years. Some of the major concerns are profound respect for the natural world, a firm commitment to Canadian culture, and a strong belief in the rights of the individual. Such concerns take the form of themes like nature triumphs over civilization, and they are the outcome of Atwood's own experience as well as the times in which she has lived. Now, when we talk about a special place of the blind assassin in Atwood's overall achievement. Now, from within Atwood's overall fictional output, The Blind Assassin is very special. This is a novel of extraordinary intricacy, and it combines romantic suspense, science fiction, and gothic drama. Um, it was published in, if I'm not wrong, in 2000, and it's one of the most ambitious and critically acclaimed novels. There is a lot of historical fiction, there is science fiction, there is mystery. It's a layered narrative featuring a novel within a novel. It explores family secrets, power dynamics, and gender roles. And the title refers to a fictional science novel written by the characters. She won the Booker Prize, uh, solidifying her status as a major international author, and that is what it stands as the most intricate and celebrated novels. Since it won the Booker Prize, It remains a defining work in Atwood's literary career. Unlike her earlier dystopian or feminist novels, The Blind Assassin masterfully blends historical fiction and metafiction and to create an intricate and multi-layered narrative as just discussed. This novel is notable for its complex storytelling, deep psychological exploration, unreliable narration, and postmodernist narrative techniques. Through the lens of its protagonists, we have Iris Chase Atwood's weaves of family saga spanning multiple generations, revealing secrets, betrayals, and the oppressive structures that govern women's lives. The novel within the novel, also titled The Blind Assassin, adds another dimension to the narrative, functioning as both an allegory and a commentary on power, gender, and storytelling itself. It's very complex narrative structure. These are some of the key features that we are going to discuss on, and one of them is the multi-layered storytelling. The novel is structured around three interwoven narratives. First is Irish Chase memoir, which is the main narrative. The novel is framed as a first-person memoir written by Irish Chase Griffin, now an old woman who is reflecting on her life, family history, and the tragic fate of her young sister, Laura Chase. The memoir serves as a retrospective account, guiding readers through the events leading up to Laura's apparent suicide in 1945 and the secrets buried in their family's past. The narrative is unreliable as Iris selectively reveals and conceals information, making the reader question her truthfulness. And another point which we need to understand in this Blind Assassin as a novel is its embedded novel within the novel. A fictional story allegedly written by Laura Chase before her death, but only published posthumously. It recounts an affair between an unnamed man and a woman who meet secretly. The man, an outlaw and revolutionary, narrates a science fiction tale called The Blind Assassin, a bizarre story set in the dystopian world. This inner novel becomes an allegory for oppression, love, and escape, mirroring the real life struggles of Iris and Laura. Then there is a genre blending historical fiction, mystery, and science fiction. It combines the elements of mystery and speculative fiction. It's a set in 20th century Canada, covering the Great Depression, World War II, and post war societal changes. It adopts the science fiction and fantasy elements, providing a surreal counterpoint to the real life events. The novel, like any meta literary commentary on storytelling, has imagination and escapism as a blending technique. Some of the major themes are the power and gender oppression, where the novel examines the oppressive structures that defines women's lives, especially in a patriarchal family. Iris and Laura Chase suffer under the control of men in power, their father, their husband, and society itself. Then we have Alex Thomas, the rebellious lover in the inner novel, who represents both a figure of resistance and risks women face when defying norms. There is family secrets, there is betrayal, there is storytelling as a means of control and escape, class struggle and economic power, memory and guilt, and redemption. Gradually, the character developed as a primary narrator, an elderly woman writing her own life story, and then later, who emerges as a woman forced into submission by societal expectations. Then there is Laura Chase, who is Eric's younger sister, often perceived as naive and idealistic. We have Richard Griffin, a wealthy businessman who marries Irish, essentially buying control over her life. Then we have Alex Thomas, a political radical and fugitive who becomes both Laura's and Irish secret lover. There is the novel has a great place in Atwood's literary career since The Blind Assassin builds upon feminist themes, dystopian elements, and Canadian history. Um, the novel showcases Atwood's ability to blend political critique with psychological depth. There's a literary recognition that the novel received. It won the Booker Prize in 2000, and it is an internationally acclaimed novelist that made Atwood status since then. Blind Assassin paved the way for later novels like Elias Grace, which also reconstructs history from a woman's perspective, and the novel's metafictional style influenced post 2000 Atwood novels, particularly The Testaments that was written in 2019. This is one of the special place of the blind assassin in Atwood's overall career. And then she had written some poetry, whose poetry also need a quick general glance. The Circle Game appeared in 1966, and The Animals in That Country in 1968. The year 1970 saw the appearance of Power Politics. Her poetry has an epigrammatic edge. It is notable for powerful images, evocations of physical disgust and gothic consciousness. Her images were sometimes be surrealistic. Two more recent volumes of poetry, that is 200 poems written in 1978 and True Stories written in 1981. The former deals with the essential questions of being a Canadian. The latter deals with the political aspects of survival. Atwood is modernist in her demonic diction and controversial idiom. Discontinuity is at the core of the utterance. You get jagged sentences. The syntax is sometimes elliptical. Hers is, on the whole, an analytical rather than a visual imagination. Violence is a usual subject, and so is temporality. Now, if you focus on some of the important questions, the if there is any connection between Atwood's reading and the general orientation of her novels, we find that Margaret Atwood's extensive reading and academic background have profoundly influenced the themes, styles, and concerns in her novels. As a highly intellectual writer, Atwood draws inspiration from literary traditions, historical narratives, feminist thought, dystopian fiction, and mythology, all of which shape her storytelling approach. The connection between her reading and the general orientation of her novels can be explored in several different ways, especially in literary and mythological influences. So, Atwood has been deeply influenced by classical literature, mythology, and literature history, which is evident in many of her works. Greek and Roman mythology, for example, the Penelope is a direct reinterpretation of Homer's Odyssey from Penelope's perspectives, challenging traditional heroic narratives. Atwood frequently references classical myths to highlight women oppression, agency, and storytelling power. Then we have feminist and political readings, Atwood's deep engagement with feminist theory, history, and political writings, which has shaped her novels' themes. Feminist theory and gender studies, Atwood's reading of feminist thinkers such as Simone de Beauvoir's has influenced her portrayal of women's autonomy. The Handmaid's Tale critic patriarchy, reproductive rights, and totalitarianism, reflecting her knowledge of historical gender based oppression. Atwood has read extensively on authoritarian regimes, propaganda, and historical oppression, influencing her dystopian and speculative fiction. The political structures in The Handmaid's Tale and The Testaments draw from real world totalitarian systems, particularly Nazi Germany, Stalinist Russia, and religious fundamentalism. As a scholar of Canadian and post colonial literature, Atwood's novels reflect Canada's colonial past, cultural anxieties, and national identity struggles. Survival, which is a thematic guide to Canadian literature written in 1972, analyzes Canadians' literary focus on survival, victimhood, and national identity, themes that reoccur in her fiction. Elias Grace is based on real life historical case demonstrating her engagement with Canada's history, crime literature, and feminist interpretation of historical narratives. Atwood has read and studied classic dystopian fiction, influencing her approach to speculative fiction. Atwood's reading of psychological fiction and Gothic literature informs her use of unreliable narrators, memory, and psychological depth. Margaret Atwood's novels are deeply shaped by her diverse and extensive reading. No, undoubtedly, her engagement with mythology, feminism, Canadian identity, dystopian literature, political history, and psychological fiction has influenced both the themes and narrative styles of her works. Uh, we then come to the second question to comment on Atwood's overall artistic achievement. Margaret Atwood is widely regarded as one of the most influential and versatile contemporary writers. Her artistic achievement spans multiple genres, including novels, poetry, essays, and literary criticism, making her a defining voice in Canadian and global literature. Atwood is remarkable for her ability to write across genres, including speculative, psychological, mythological, poetry and short stories, nonfiction, and literary criticism. This ability to move fluidly between genres has made her a significant figure in both literary and popular culture. Atwood novels have become key texts in feminist studies, inspiring discussions on women's rights, power structures, and autonomy. She has become a symbol of resistance. Her work have influenced feminist movements and political discourse on authoritarianism. Atwood employs a range of experimental and postmodern techniques such as unreliable narratives, and her mastery of storytelling challenges traditional narrative forms, engages readers in complex, layered interpretations. The trilogy, Mad Adam trilogy, is a major contribution to eco fiction addressing issues of climate change, genetic modification, and biotechnology. Atwood has actively promoted environmental awareness using fiction as a tool for social and ecological consciousness. Atwood has received numerous prestigious literary awards, including the Booker Prize, the Governor General Award, Arthur C. Clarke Award, Golden Booker Prize nomination. Her global influence extends beyond literature into television, film, and activism, making her one of the most culturally significant authors of the 20th and the 21st centuries. Atwood has shaped Canadian literature global reputation, making it more visible and influential. Her books are widely studied in academic institutions and have inspired adaptations in film, television, and theatre. Her engagement with social and political issues ensures her relevance across generations. Margaret Atwood's artistic achievement is monumental, spanning diverse genres, themes, and global impact. Through her narrative innovation, feminist insight, environmental awareness, and speculative imagination, she has established herself as one of the most important writers of contemporary literature. Her influence extends beyond fiction into activism, literary criticism, and popular culture, making her a truly transformational figure in global literature. So, here we come to an end of Unit 10 and also Unit 9 and 10 both. Tomorrow we continue with Unit 11. Here we discuss about surfacing, we discuss about theme, structure, technique, and characterization. Again, one of the significant write up by Margaret Atwood, surfacing, that we will be studying about in Unit 11. And then we will discuss Unit 12. about the language that surfacing been using. So basically tomorrow we will be studying about unit 11 and unit 12, where we discuss about themes and language, imagery, symbolism, and we also discuss some important questions, and then we are done with the class. um, Done with block 3. So yes, so we are done with today's class. Thank you so much.